Yeah, first thing about tonight, I suppose, if I'm not because in the last kind of year to 18 months, I've been really lucky, really, and really fortunate to be able to share like my story around mental health a lot, and I mean a lot, and I've done it very, very publicly. I've shared my story at events, I've done it at workshops, I've blog posts, newsletters, like social media, like you name it, I've like shared very publicly about myself. And that story kind of ends at a certain point, basically. It's the story of a time in my life when I was a bit of a closed book, really. Like, I was quite unemotional, I didn't really talk about my feelings at all, and I definitely let a lot of suppressed feelings, challenges, insecurities, anxieties bottle up to the point where I really struggled, I suppose, with my mental health, struggled with anxiety and didn't really talk about that ever at all, to the point where I was having panic attacks, and I suppose at that point my mental health was like, it was stopping me, it was holding me back in my daily life, it was debilitating me. And I then kind of very dramatically, or what felt very dramatic to me, opened up about it. I wrote a blog post which kind of went viral in what felt like it went viral to me, like 15,000 views in a couple of days, like this deluge of like response and emails, and then went on to write in The Guardian, do these public talks and everything. And usually when I tell that story, I then kind of conclude by saying, and this is Sanctus, and I just kind of like pitch the Sanctus vision and talk a lot about that. I kind of stop at that point talking about me. And tonight, I suppose, I kind of want to continue that story, really, and just kind of talk about what it's been like for the last year to pretty much consistently talk about my mental health and try and be more open and I suppose work on my mental health. And if I look back, when I did share that story initially, and I kind of came out, that's kind of how I look at it. I put my hand up and said, look, I have mental health, basically. I kind of felt very naked, is the best way of saying it, like emotionally naked, as if I just ran down Shoreditch High Street and like shrieked. And I felt very exposed, and still quite raw, really. And just because I talked openly about it didn't mean anything had healed. Didn't mean that I was suddenly like okay and fine and better. I still felt very anxious. I still felt off. I still definitely didn't feel right. I was kind of still nervous, twitchy. I just still definitely wasn't myself. And in many ways, I was still like numb to feelings. At that point, when I started to first talk about my own mental health, I didn't really like know how to feel or how to talk about my feelings. And the only feeling I really had was like passion. And that passion was to just get better. Like, I was just passionate about mental health, about improving myself and my own life, and that's the only really feeling I had. Everything else I was still quite numb to, and I didn't really know how to articulate that. And about then, with Sanctus, we started doing these groups, and really they were kind of like a smaller, more intimate version of this, where we kind of all had the opportunity to just talk. And I just like used that space to literally just talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and just unravel like everything that was kind of in my head that I bottled up for so long, like the self-doubt, the fear of failure, the anxiety, the uncertainty, the questions around my identity, who I am, what's my purpose, what are my values. And I kind of just unraveled all this stuff in my head. And I think like underpinning that was, I suppose, this like almost like existential question of like, who am I, and am I good enough? Like those were the questions that kind of really plagued me, and just I kind of couldn't get away from almost. I remember at the time, like I kept this journal, and I would just write page after page of I am, full stop. And it was just like I am. And I was almost like reaffirming to myself that like I was good enough and that I was me almost. And I then started to do more like, again, more one-on-one work. I had a coach and eventually a therapist, and just started to like inquire more into myself and talk about things that I suppose I've never really talked about. And I just started to like learn who I thought I was, really. I'd never really known who I was. I'd always been uncertain about the type of person I was. I felt like I was split in two. I was like, am I this like really rational, like organised person, or am I this really like creative guy? And I was always really unclear about who I am. Maybe that's because like I'm an only child, I've never had the brother or sister to kind of bounce off or whatever. I'd never really felt I knew myself at all. And as I started to go on this journey, I suppose, I felt like I really started to learn and like accept myself. It was kind of like I'd opened up my chest, like the hood of a car almost, and like flipped up the hood, or the bonnet, sorry. And I looked inside, and at first it was a fucking mess in there. It was messy, it was dirty, it was unclean. I didn't know what it was. I couldn't work my way around it. And I suppose I just kind of started playing with all these different pieces and looking at them and trying to kind of work myself out a little bit. And slowly things did get clearer. And I've got 5 minutes. Does that say 5 minutes if I've got my contact lenses in? Yeah. Which helps with concept, I suppose. Yeah, so I kind of started to learn about who I was, and I suppose I kind of like accept myself, because before I very much felt like I was trying to be someone. You know, I was ridden in my head with shoulds. I should be this, I should do that, I should do this. And that was the kind of inner chatter within me. It was like, oh no, you should do this, you should do that. And really through this process, I was trying to learn to just like see who I was kind of inside and kind of accept that. And I started to notice these sides of myself that had almost been dormant. I mentioned this kind of creative side, and for a long time, in my head, my I suppose like my inner critic, you might call it, it told me that I wasn't creative and that just wasn't me. But suddenly I found myself like, you know, branding Sanctus or telling stories or, you know, writing blogs and just building like a shit website, just being much more creative and being creative when I never thought I could do that. And another area of my life where that changed is relationships. You know, before I was so closed off that I wouldn't dare take a risk in a relationship. I would dress that up as like, I'm a big lad who like wants to be single, but really that was like fear of letting someone on the inside. And as I started to like accept myself a little bit more, I found it easier to take risks in relationships and kind of open myself up to someone and be in a relationship, I suppose, and let someone kind of see the real me. And all that sounds brilliant and great and positive, and it has been, but at the same time it was also extremely difficult and hard, because I started to learn things about myself that I didn't necessarily like, and seeing sides of myself that I kind of knew were there. I kind of didn't want to admit, you know, the arrogant side, the ignorant, the stubborn. They're all part of me as well, and I started to learn about those, and I didn't necessarily want to know about those, or the side of myself that's extremely hard on myself, that kind of continues to beat myself up. And I started to learn those too, and as I started, I changed basically. I changed a lot, but kind of really like didn't change at all, if that makes sense. I kind of just became, I suppose, what was already there. And as a result, what was really impacted was relationships and people around me. And some relationships flourished and blossomed and developed and got much stronger and more meaningful, whilst others seemed to kind of drift away. And I realised that, you know, maybe actually some friendships weren't that strong, or they were friends for a certain part of me that kind of maybe moved on. And I had to let go of a lot of friendships, or they had to change, maybe not let them go. And that was hard and quite sad, I suppose. And you know, even that's still kind of quite hard now, I suppose. And I think in general, you know, when I reflect back, it kind of doesn't mean that just because I've been on this like incredible like journey and all that, doesn't mean like I'm happy all the time either. And almost in many ways, like life hasn't changed at all. life is a constant, like it stays exactly the same, but I feel much kind of closer to life. So I feel more there, like more present, more connected. I kind of just feel more me, as opposed to, thinking that I need to be this guy, wakes up at 6 in the morning, has a green juice, goes to the gym and is happy all the time. Like that's just rubbish. Like, I'm not, and I still have days that are shit, and I still get stressed out because I need to put an event on and do a talk. And that's still there, but I kind of feel closer to it, I suppose. And when I was thinking about this talk, I was really struggling to find like a conclusion of how to end it, because I suppose there kind of isn't. I don't see that there is an end, really. It's kind of like this process is very much ongoing, and as I develop and the world changes and people change, like that process of, I suppose, like exploring yourself or myself is constant, and it will kind of never change. And needing to have that space to kind of be open, be vulnerable, and talk is never not going to be necessary for me. So I kind of know I've rushed through a little bit, but I kind of suppose wanted to end, not to tell anyone what they should do, but to kind of just say that I don't think there's ever any harm in questioning and inquiring and kind of asking why you feel like that or why I feel like that, because in my experience, like, you'll always be surprised at what you might find, and I think in that process you'll kind of only learn more about yourself and only be able to kind of be yourself more. So thanks everyone for listening to my story.